yoga teacher. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. And Patti. Patti Geolat is founder of the Something for Kelly Foundation, a nonprofit national organization created to empower children aged 6 to 12 years to fight their predisposition toward eating disorders. She is also a published author, public speaker, and founder of CEO of Geolat Companies, a widely known authority on the appraisal, brokerage, and sale of fine jewelry. Welcome, Patti.
Thank you, Cindy. Very happy to be here and in fact, honored to have the opportunity. Thank you.
Great. See, this is one of the amazing things about being in this field. I mean, we have all been brought into the eating disorders field for different reasons, but we meet people that we otherwise would never have met. And this is one of those combinations. When I first introduced Patti and Robyn, so the sparks flew. And I was thinking, you know, under other circumstances, these two women might never have met each other. But here we are today, all on an EDGI talk. So we're going to start out. You each have your own passions about mental health stigma, and about eating disorders. So let's just kick this off. And Robyn, I'm going to start with you. Just tell us a little bit about sort of how you got into this area, what your passions are, and your relationship to the eating disorders field.
Okay. And again, thank you so much for the invite. This is really fun. So my story started when I was 8 years old, and I had my first moment of being conscious about getting fat, and my intense fear of gaining weight began. And I'm a lot older than 8 now, and I've managed that, but that was really the beginning of my relationship with an eating disorder. And, you know, my story has evolved over time, and now there's like 20 different stories in the series. You know, it's like, I've got like 20 books right now. But really what was monumental for me is in 2016, I heard a very influential speaker, a mutual friend of ours, Craig Kramer, talk about his daughter's encounter with anorexia and how he wanted to change the way people think about mental health. And it moved me and touched me and inspired me so deeply that I said, I've got to do this. I've got to give a TED Talk. And what I can tell you is that preparing for and delivering my TED Talk, which I called What's Your Story, has been more impactful in my ongoing recovery and maintenance and well-being than anything else I've ever done for my eating disorder, anxiety, or depression. And because it so profoundly changed who I was as a person, and for the first time ever, I felt comfortable in my skin, I thought, my goodness, like I've got to teach this skill to other people. And so my call to action in my TED Talk was to create a storytelling initiative called What's Your Story, where I train people in storytelling. And then we have story slams or, you know, live events. And what's really great is that every event raises money for a nonprofit. And so I've taken this burden of a lifelong eating disorder, and I've changed the way that I think about it, and I have found the bright spots and connected with people like you who are pioneering the way we think about eating disorders. And that's my relationship with it. It's been with me my whole life, but I'm choosing now to give it a purpose.
I love that story on so many different levels. We had June Alexander join us on EDGI Talk as well, and she talked about the role of diaries. And, you know, that's almost like telling yourself a story, you know, every day. And, you know, the power of storytelling. We did an advocacy day about a month back, and, you know, I can go up to Capitol Hill and spout off statistics and data and studies until the cows come home. But it is the personal stories that really make a difference. You know,
It is. And
well.
in my storytelling workshop, I say, you could spew data after data after data. Nobody will remember or even care about what you say unless the data has a story.
Exactly. And speaking of stories, Patti, tell us a little bit about your story and what got you into the eating disorders area.
Thank you. I would love to. But first, Robyn, I never heard you tell that story as well as you just now did. I've been aware of your story before, but I think that is just
thank you.
And compelling that you are doing exactly what you said, repositioning it for yourself for positive. So I just wanted to put that out there. My story is different, as everybody's story is different, of course. Something for Kelly was created for my niece, Kelly Burke Noby, and Kelly had an eating disorder a lot like Robyn for several years throughout her life. She didn't treat it in the normal way that a lot of people do. She was not in denial. She knew she had an eating disorder, but she really didn't want to deal with it. So she would typically come up with explanations like, I've got midterms, I'm cramming for my school right now, I'm going to be in somebody's wedding, so I'm planning for the party right now. And there was always a mañana energy around when she was going to deal with this. Kelly started, I believe, to have some challenges when she was in high school, and then they grew pretty much exponentially when she went into college. And so one day when Kelly came back from college for some break, it was just widely apparent that she had lost way too much weight. And so I think part of the difficulty for us was because she didn't have a lot of trips to the hospital and she didn't have a lot of visits to a clinician or a treatment provider, I think my family remained more ignorant than not because of this situation. We didn't understand the severity. We didn't understand the high rate of mortality. But while we did have Kelly here in our life, I have 3 sisters, one of whom is Nancy, Kelly's mom, and I have a brother. I was the only one not living nearby. They all live in Southern Illinois or St. Louis, Missouri. And I live in Dallas, Texas. So I think that when I would see her, it would be more pronounced because I didn't see a gradual change. I remember that my other sisters and I would talk, what can we do for Kelly? Should we say something about this? We know she already knows. Nancy is a nurse, so she understands the gravity and the severity of all this. So what could we possibly say that she didn't already know? What could we possibly do that wouldn't make her already feel worse than, hey, I'm a medical professional and I can't help my child? Mm-hmm. So it was just like during her lifetime, we really struggled. So my phrase during her lifetime kind of implies the end of that piece of the story. Mm-hmm. One day, Kelly went to bed and did not wake up. Kelly was married. She had a master's degree. She had a job. She had all of the trappings of success and a happy life. And in point of fact, when Kelly passed, she was not at her lowest weight that she ever had. She had somewhat improved in her weight. And so we believe that the damage had already been done and it was cumulative. So it took me quite a number of years before I had any kind of inspiration about what I could do. Every time I would go back to see my family at holiday, Christmas, whatever, I was kind of at a loss for how to bring up the subject of Kelly, especially in the first year, you know, a birthday missed, a holiday missed. And Nancy was so emotional, as were the rest of us, obviously, and her brothers and her dad, that I really didn't know. Do I say something and know that she's going to get emotional? Or do I refrain? And then she wonders, hey, did everybody just kind of let Kelly pass and nobody cares to even talk about her anymore? So that was another aspect that was really tough, which I didn't really think about it until just now in this conversation. I think that's a whole opportunity for family members to have a conversation with other people that say, how do you talk to parents who have a child taken away from them? So that's another conversation. One day, I can remember it quite vividly, I just sort of had this brainstorm that I wanted to do something for Kelly after she had passed. It was like 7 years. And so I texted Nancy because I didn't know how she would respond. I wanted to give her the chance, if it hit her kind of hard in an emotional way, I wanted her to have the opportunity to think about it rather than me calling her on the phone and putting her on the spot.
Right.
Well, I was just so happy because I said, what would you think if I wanted to do something for Kelly? And she texted back almost immediately, what have you got in mind? And at the time, I didn't have a clue what I had in mind. I just wanted first her permission to think about it. So I did some homework, and it was pretty much about consciousness raising or raising awareness or something like that. And there's walks that people do for that kind of purpose. And so that's where we got started. It was a small walk in Texas. And their goal was to get $5,000. Between myself and my friends and the people that I harassed, we made the goal ourselves for them.
Right.
So I kind of pretty much knew that my passion was pretty much born into something that was more than just doing walks for other people. And so I decided that I wanted to create a foundation and gift it to my family. And so Something for Kelly was born. Now you know why we have that name too.
I've always wondered about that, but now, thanks to your story, I understand Patti wanted to do something for Kelly.
Yep.
And that's what you did. I love that origin of the name because I have wondered about it, but wasn't sure. Now you both touched on something that I just want to dive into because I think it's where your two stories converge. I mean, they actually converge in a lot of different places, but and you mentioned this, Patti, and I've been dealing with this with some other folks over the past week, and that is how do you piece together the story? Oops, we lost Robyn. There she is.
Oh, sorry.
How do you piece together the story after someone does die from an eating disorder? Robyn, have you done any work along those lines or talked with any families about that?
I've talked with parents of people that have eating disorders, but I haven't gotten into the how do we talk about the passing.
Yeah.
But I think that that's a great opportunity because
yeah.
Nobody should be ashamed to share the stories that shaped who their families are or who they are.
No, exactly. And sometimes I feel like people don't want to remember those stories because they're too painful. You know, it's easier to just sort of sweep them under the rug and move on. But in reality, you know, like Patti, like you said, you know, you thought she was doing better. And, you know, that sure is a sign that weight isn't an indicator of how well someone's doing.
Yes, and that's exactly why I was referencing that, because I think that that's a stereotype that people have. Unless they look emaciated, they're probably not too far into the disorder, and that's no measure.
Wow, yeah.
I remember when I was in treatment as a kid and in residential, the doctors always said, you know, the adverse events usually happen during refeeding or right after. So as a kid, that scared me. I was like, well, I don't want to start eating because I don't want to die.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But I think the more people could know about the deleterious consequences that are happening inside to our bodies, Patti, to your point, the better.
Because you really can't see the damage that's being done necessarily, right? You know, and I think both of you talked about, you know, Robyn, your life, and Patti, you talking about Kelly, I think you said had all the trappings of success.
Yes.
And that just dives right into the what we see on the outside isn't necessarily what's going on the inside.
Absolutely. Yeah. She married her high school sweetheart. They owned a house. Like I said, she had her master's degree. She was successful by most people's measure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like she was that quintessential high achieving anorexic.
You nailed it, Robyn. She very smart, very kind, very outward going, had a lot of friends. She was loved. She was born and raised in a small town, married a high school sweetheart. His family owned a business. Her dad was involved with a small business. So when she passed, the service, the line went out the door for hours and hours where people were coming to pay their regards. So she, by a lot of measures, she had a lot of friends. She was happy in her marriage. So yeah, I think it's really important that it's not just the the stereotype that a lot of people like to portray.
And Robyn, you said something that I want to come back to too. And again, I just keep thinking back to conversations I've been having over the last week. And, you said high achieving anorexia, high achieving people, all the trappings of success. You have a lot of success in your background as well. But yet you talked about pivoting. I mean, that's sort of like the word of the year, aside from unprecedented, but how to take all that energy that is put toward maintaining anorexia. And it's hard, right? It's hard work.
Yeah.
And if you can get someone to direct that elsewhere, like you've done with your passion, just how amazing that energy can be if it's redirected in a healthy direction. Can you just play with that a little bit? And
I'm like getting so emotional right now, like the hair sticking up on my arms. I'm like, I've done a lot of spiritual work and a lot of reading and meditating and, spending time thinking about how is this mindset serving me? And you nailed it. Having anorexia is it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And, I've got 2 kids, I've got a husband, I've got a career, I've got a small business. And, I just realized like I've got a choice. I can focus on my eating disorder, and I can focus on all of the rules and the trappings of the rules that come with it. Or I can help be a better person, and I can help the world be a better version of itself. And, what do I choose? And I'm at my best when I'm helping others to be at their best. I'm not at my best when I'm a slave to my treadmill or to my Peloton or my push-ups. And I think that pivoting has also, as we see here organically, created so many connections. And anorexia, as you know from your research, it's very isolating.
Yes.
And we choose compliance over whatever we come up with in our brains that how to be compliant over connections. And I get so much energy and joy out of helping people to become better versions of themselves and find their purpose. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it totally does. And it also makes me think about the study that we just completed that looked at the impact of the pandemic on people with and like the number one thing that people were saying was that the social isolation was just, it felt like such a risk factor for relapse or for intensification of symptoms. And, you're right, anorexia thrives in isolation. And, here we are having to isolate, which is it's a prison for people with an eating disorder. We've been trying so hard just to try to keep people connected, even if they have to do it virtually. So, so you answered my question and then some.
Good.
Yeah. Patti, you have any thoughts about the whole COVID situation and how that's influencing people with eating disorders?
Oh, absolutely. I saw something the other day that said that calls to eating disorder centers have jumped 80%. And so there's no doubt that the whole mental health aspect of eating disorders or mental health in general are dramatically impacted. The number of people that are experiencing domestic violence, anguish, anxiety. And I remember hearing a professional the other day say how important it was for kids to get back to school physically, because some of the first responders were their teachers to recognize if they were having any kind of a struggle. So yes, the mental health moment that we record weekly is really directly addressing that situation also. I think it's important.
Go ahead, Robyn. Shoot.
Patti knows, in May, I really had a relapse of my anxiety and my depression, and was like the most active in my eating disorder that I've been in a very, very long time. And I talked to Patti about it because I blew her off one day because we had a call and I was in my bed and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And then when we finally talked, I told her the truth, that I was just really struggling. And I wrote a blog post about it for my website. And even now that I think about it, that blog post, I think, talks about pivoting. And I have a choice. I can stay in bed under my weighted blanket, or I can get up and I can do something about it. And I think COVID had a really big impact for a lot of people. I know I was paranoid about food insecurity.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah. So yes, you're definitely onto something.
Yeah.
Robyn, thank you for sharing that story too, because I was not going to share it on your behalf, but I do think it's really important that people hear stories from people who have the courage to say, yes, I feel like I'm fairly healthy. I feel like I've got this pretty much under control, but I have my moments. And I think it's wonderful for somebody like yourself who says, most of the time I've got this beat, but every once in a while something happens, and people need to hear that it's not one and done and it's perfect and all over and you never have any issues ever again. Of course you can.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and again, the power of the story and just sharing. And, you know, and it's one of those, it's come up to the question of relapse as well. You know, people always ask me, can you recover from an eating disorder? And yeah, you can recover from an eating disorder, but it becomes part of your health legacy. You know, you can't erase it. And I know I've given this example too many times, but like I broke my back when I was in college. And, you know, I have recovered and I'm, you know, pretty strong and athletic and can do most things. But there are some things that I know I cannot do or I'm going to end up in bed. It is part of my health legacy. Yeah. And I say this to people who've had anorexia. It's like one of the things that you have to be careful of for the rest of your life is ever being in negative energy balance. Because if you're in a position where you're taking in less energy than you're expending, there's the potential for that switch to go off again and you to descend back down. And that becomes just a real quick, slippery slope sometimes.
Well, and then couple that with people saying, oh my God, Robyn, you lost weight, or, you know, Robyn, you this, or, you know, you must be working out a lot. Because for the anorexic, that's that crazy positive reinforcement that we can get addicted to.
Right. Are you able to share, if someone says that to you, what goes through your head?
So it's so funny that you ask, because the other day I sent a picture to somebody for a purpose and they wrote me back and she said, oh my God, you're skinny as F. And I called her and I said, you know, because you know that I'm a straight shooter, I really want to give you the feedback. You know, invite you not to make comments about my body, you know, moving forward, because while you or other people might think that that's a compliment, it's really negatively reinforcing for me. And it can open up doors that need to stay shut. So I do tell people. And I remember one time when I was really skinny, like when I was around 30, somebody made a comment about, you look like you lost so much weight. And I couldn't help it. I looked at them and I said, oh, it looks like you gained a lot of weight. Obviously that was before all of my self-help and my my spirituality.
Yeah. But what you hear and experience is so different than what they intend. But the bottom line is, why do people do that in the first place? I mean, you know, why people feel compelled or allowed or think they have the right to comment on your body, that's something I remember, like when I was pregnant.
I was just going to say that.
Crazy. I was like, don't talk about my body, you know? And it's like, so I think that was the closest I've come to really getting super defensive about my body boundary and saying, don't you be talking about, you know, how I'm changing.
Right. Or people that would just like touch your belly and be like, I think it's a girl. Like,
get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Patty's laughing at
us. Stories like that from here, girls.
Yeah, but it is so incredibly true. The other thing that I really want to touch on today is, we're doing all this genetic work, and both of you have been so supportive of the genetic research that we've been doing. And, one of the things that actually interests me is how people start weaving the findings from our genetic study into their personal stories about how they developed their illness. Because, sometimes people go through therapy and, God forbid, but it happens, they have a therapist who builds a story around how their parents caused their eating disorder or something like that. And that's the narrative that they carry around with them. And now we're introducing this piece that says, hey, there's a genetic component to this, and maybe there's a metabolic component to this. And people need to start revising their personal stories to incorporate that into understanding their own illness. How have each of you, given your own narratives that you came into this with, incorporated this genetic information into your own story?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because as Robyn said in the beginning of her story, the situation can evolve. So Something for Kelly was created for what we described earlier in your introduction of us, to help kids be aware of their predisposition, et cetera. But we have evolved also, because just as in the beginning, it was a little bit more about consciousness raising. Now for Something for Kelly, it's much more about hard science, which is why I was attracted to work with you, Dr. Bulik. And we have a new mantra, which is, or tagline, or whatever we want to call it, we are bridging the gap from science to solutions. So the idea is we are going to work with Dr. Bulik and support getting participation for the EDGI initiative. And after that, when she has her data all kind of crunched and results are put together, then we are going to work with the clinicians and the treatment providers to help get that information out more quickly. The impetus of that, Dr. Bulik, is that when I was doing some research one day, I found that the average gap from science to practice is 17 years.
Yep.
And that has just driven me crazy. Yep. Because in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, that might have been okay in 1950, pre all of the technology that we have, but it is absolutely not acceptable in the 21st century. 17 years, I want like that Ghostbuster sign with the 17 years. Take it out, that's wrong. So that's what Something for Kelly is doing. And I'm very happy, and I'm very proud to say that that's how we've evolved.
Well, I'm extremely grateful for all the support that Something for Kelly has given us. But I gotta say, I love the new mantra.
Isn't it awesome?
I mean,
it's
science to solutions is perfect. Because, and actually getting help to get there is really important too, because like I can do all the science, but if it's not going to get into the hands of the people who actually need it, what good is it, right?
Exactly. And so you are the science, clearly, obviously, and as you help me to understand your results, then we are already starting to work with clinicians and treatment providers on a nationwide basis so that we can help translate with them into something that lay people can understand and professional treatment providers can embrace.
Nice.
And we'll be working with NC as well to help get that information.
Right, the National Center of Excellence for
Oh, thank you.
That's okay.
Acronyms, bad, sorry.
Yeah, we'll be putting all these websites up. We'll be putting Robyn's and Patti's and Seed and all of that. Robyn, what about you and your narrative with this biological information?
Do you want my funny answer first or my honest answer?
Whatever order you want to give them in, we'll take them.
So when I first read about it, I actually felt very validated. And I felt like there is a little bit of a clue here into why I am the way I am. And when I was 8 years old in the early 80s, the only other anorexic that my pediatrician had ever heard of was Karen Carpenter. Wow. So it's not as if I had heard the word and then said, I aspire to be anorexic. Like, it literally just happened. And I always thought I did something bad, or I like read the wrong book, or, I never really felt comfortable with this is just who I am. And the research actually makes me feel like it's not my fault. It gives me even more permission to talk and to share my story. And, you know, I've shared your research with my mom, who's very happy to hear that it's not her fault.
I'm sure, yes.
And my husband has been so supportive, you know, since he's met me. We've been married for almost 20 years. And he sees that if I don't exercise most days, that I have a hard time. And he knows that, no pun intended, that's how I metabolize my feelings and everything. And it just keeps me even. And it's not over exercising. It's, you know, an hour. And sometimes if I'm like, no, I can't go to the kids' soccer game because I need to, you know, do this, he doesn't understand. And then I'll cite your research and I'll be like, see, this is why I have to exercise, because we always have to be moving. So it's genetics. So take that. So that's why I've metabolized your research.
I have heard of a lot of uses for our research, but I think that's my favorite right now.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. But Dr. Bulik said,
have your husband call me if he has any questions.
Seriously. You know, but I think, like, as I'm joking about my husband, I think about, you know, all of the partners of people with eating disorders. And, you know, and Patti, you talked about this earlier with, you know, how to support the families. And gosh, I know my husband, like, he could definitely use like an eating disorder spouse friend.
Yeah. And you know, that's why we developed the couple-based treatment too. And that's something that NSEED is going to be doing. So we're actually, after this, I have to go film the introduction, because we're going to be training other therapists how to do couple-based treatment for eating disorders. Because you can only train so many people if you fly around the country, which we can't even do at this point, you know, and train 10 people at a time. But if we can get that training online, more people will be able to deliver that. And the partners have been so grateful for this intervention. They want to help, but there's no playbook. You know, there's just no playbook for this is what you do if your partner has an eating disorder. So, so that's going to be available to more people.
Wonderful.
And the other one, Patti, that you and I talked about this week is siblings. You know, there is not enough out there for siblings. What do you do when, you know, when your sibling just requires so much attention and resources from your parents? And, you know, someone said that it sucks energy out of the family, or just directs energy toward that person. And I think siblings need a lot of support as well to understand and to figure out what they can and can't do. They can't necessarily save someone.
Dr. Bulik, I was glad that you brought that back up, because after we spoke, after you sent me that email about somebody in need of a sibling from another sibling who had died, I reached out to Kelly's brothers, and I think that there's some potential for, I want to tell you the story because I think it's really
go for it.
Cool. So I called Todd, Kelly's older brother, and I didn't want to send this to him in an email because, once again, I mean, it's a pretty private request, right? So I told him about you and about what we were doing. And he said, oh yeah, I know Dr. Bulik by name and blah, blah. And so I said, she told me about somebody who is a brother of somebody who died. Would you be willing to make yourself available? And I am so proud to say he very quickly said, well, sure. And we started to talk about this, and get this, Dr. B, he actually said to me on the telephone, you know, it might help me. I haven't had as much time to talk about it as I should. And after that, I spoke to Nancy, and I don't even need to begin to tell you what went on then. So Dr. B, your email to me has created a whole nother thread of healing for my family at Something for Kelly.
Wow. My turn for goosebumps, Robyn.
That's really, really great.
That's amazing. And God, pass my gratitude on to Kelly's siblings as well. That's so cool.
So whatever he can do, he said, you know, Patti, if the man wants to talk out, I mean, start off like pen pals if he wants to just email,
Right.
and if later he wants to talk on the phone, that's okay. So I was just blown away, and I'm so happy that I could share this with you on a Zoom call, because I was so proud of him and happy that I could offer this to you and your friend.
Well, if they're watching you today, I'm just going to thank them straight out. Thank you so much for your willingness to help. And I think you're right, Patti. This is another new direction. That's something for Kelly can go in.
I think so, because, you know, there's a lot of parental groups. There's a fair amount of parental support. As you correctly identified, there's not for partners. But, and even though siblings need support for that, all of that understanding that you said about the resources being taken by the parents, that's a totally another group when you've actually had one of your siblings taken from you. And then how do you talk to your mom? Nancy even said to me, Patti, Todd can talk to you in a way he can't talk to me because he's probably concerned that he'll upset me.
Exactly.
So here's a whole other way that we can help people.
Yes.
And brothers and sisters helping brothers and sisters kind of a thing.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Oh, ladies, this is incredible. This has been wonderful. And I'm going to give you each a chance to, now's your chance. Eating disorders are so incredibly misunderstood. And if there's any final things that you really want people to hear, now's your chance. Robyn, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'm thinking. So we talked a little bit today about my experience has been that my eating disorder has been a chronic, partner throughout my life. And, people talk about recovery. And I remember when I was a kid going to a support group and having somebody tell me, like, I recovered, like, recovery is possible. And, I'm 11 years old and I'm thinking, like, how is recovery possible? It's not like drugs where you just abstain, or alcohol, you just abstain. Like, you've got to eat. And it never really resonated with me. And, what I think is that you can live a very productive life. You can be a mother, a father, a sister, a wife, a best friend. You can be all these things. You can have a career and learn how to live with your eating disorder. I'm not saying that recovery isn't possible, but I haven't, fully experienced it. And I think there's a lot of pressure for people to say that they are in recovery and then recovered. And I think there's a way to manage that. You've got this chronic illness that's just like high blood pressure or high cholesterol. And as long as what you're doing is, in balance and it's not going too far in one direction or another, that's a great homeostasis for you. And, I feel I'm so grateful. I thank God every single day for my health and mental well-being. And, if I could be a resource to anybody, suffering, somebody curious, anything, I'm an open book. I'm happy to support and like Patti, connect the dots between people and resources. So that's what I'll end with. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, Robyn, thank you so much for sharing here and sharing in all the different venues and avenues that you share your story. It makes a difference, and it makes people feel like they're not alone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Patti, some final thoughts that you want to make sure people hear?
Yes. First of all, Robyn, I agree that the pressure for people to say they're in recovery or are recovered is equally difficult to some of the opposite messaging that they get, which we know is not helpful. I think that there are a lot of people who feel so much pressure to say that they are recovered that they were saying it before they really fully are. And I think that we need to allow them the grace not to feel the pressure to be saying they're recovered, allow them the grace to be on their journey as long and as often as they need to. So I wanted to say thank you for that, because I definitely agree. Now, the final thing that I would like to say is that Dr. Bulik and I have talked numerous times about stereotypes. And one of the things that Dr. Bulik is really wanting to knock on the head, or at least hit upside the head, if not on the head, is the notion that it is not the typical stereotype that you might think. And this is a plug for EDGI. Something for Kelly is creating a campaign of these videos so that we can show eating disorders do not know geographic boundaries, genetic boundaries. Well, I don't know about that. You'll have to tell me.
We'll
but
figure that one out.
Religious boundaries, cultural boundaries, gender. And there's just, so that is a takeaway that, yes, it's predominantly the Anglo community that might be hardest hit by anorexia. But there are other communities that are impacted by the other eating disorders exactly along the lines of what Dr. Bulik is going to be studying. So if you think that you have had or have an eating disorder, please go to edgi.org, edgi.org, because your input is important. And that's what I wanted to end it with. And thank you.
Yeah, and Patti, I'm so glad that you said that, because I was thinking, oh man, I forgot to say that I'm so excited about the possibility of having evidence-based, treatment for eating disorders, and how all of this hard work that Dr. Bulik and her colleagues is doing is really bringing us, to a place where we might actually be able to prevent it and treat it successfully. So thank you for reminding me of that.
It's a great way to end it, Dr. Bulik, and thank you for the opportunity to meet, and to first of all meet Robyn. You're the one that introduced us, as you mentioned earlier, and to have the opportunity to work with you in something very important.
Yeah, you both are wonderful. It was so lovely to have you today, and I don't even have to tell people to go visit edgi.org now, because Patti, you've already done that for me.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's great. And you can look at us on our other social media channels as well. They're all at EDGI Study, so EDGI Study. And we will be posting Robyn's websites and Patti's websites. And both of you, I love you both. You both just have the most amazing energy and dedication and passion. And thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Ciao.